Still in Ukraine, Ole Derevyanko, co-founder and chairman of ISSP and an advisor to the Ukrainian government, thank you for joining us today in Kiev.
Thank you for having me.
So the war in Ukraine is approaching the one-year mark, but the first shots of this war were not fired on the battlefield, but rather in cyberspace.
Basically, the way it was executed and the targets, they chose the governmental online resources, and the message that they posted on the defaced website was a clear kind of signage that it was a war message attack, that they actually do plan to attack. And actually, if you look back to all those major waves of cyber attacks that took place in Ukraine back in 2015, 2016, after the war started in 2014, because now we just see the next phase of the war. And if we look back at that time, we can also see that those attacks that were targeting critical infrastructure with the aim to impose pretty severe consequences, which means that for us, and I think that that's one of the lessons that everyone should understand, is that when a country, a state actor, is ready to execute a cyber attack that can cause significant damage to critical infrastructure and could cause even the life losses, because the healthcare could be disrupted, healthcare operations and many other things. That means that this state actor is also ready to wage a kinetic war as well.
Let's talk about the private sector tech companies and their role in this type of conflict. Is the private sector more equipped to provide vital services in times of emergency, such the current ones?
Oh yeah, absolutely, because the specifics of Ukrainian cybersecurity domain is that the private sector, and specifically the banks and telco companies, they were much more advanced in terms of their cybersecurity capabilities than most of the governmental institutions. And that's because they were, when the cyber attack started to happen, banks and telcos were the first who were attacked. And those organizations had to, deal and develop their cybersecurity capabilities from, back 15, 20 years ago. And definitely for the last 10 years, they invested a lot of resources into developing their cybersecurity capabilities, whereas the state, specifically in Ukraine, their understanding was very limited, and of course, the resources were also limited, and that's why Ukraine as a government started to take care about cybersecurity probably only after the Revolution of Dignity, when the major cyber attacks started to happen in Ukraine. Yeah, and private sector, of course, is helping a lot, and cybersecurity service providers, cybersecurity vendors, IT service providers and vendors, they're really engaged today to help the government to succeed and prevail.
Let's talk about the nature of the attacks recently. Since the conflict began, cybercrime was reduced to minimal numbers. Why is that?
Well, you don't know whether cybercrime were used or not before you really identify who was the attacker. But of course, most of the attacks that we see today, they're clearly not financially motivated. It doesn't mean that the financially motivated attacks don't happen. But if you even look back, state actor attacks were the major attacks in Ukraine, even for the last maybe last 5-7 years. So of course the cyber crime, financially motivated attacks also took place, but there were, even before the full-scale invasion, there were relatively short numbers compared to the rest of the world, or the countries like United States or the European Union. So Ukraine was predominantly targeted by state actor attacks. I would say that what we see today is that many of those attacks that we face today, they're not as sophisticated as they were before, and partially because cyber is a domain where you cannot kind of launch an offensive operation without necessary preparation.
Thank you so much for joining us. Looking forward to seeing you here in Israel in this year's Cybertech conference.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll love to come. Thank you.